If you've ever asked whether enterprise asset management is part of ERP, you've probably been given 3 different answers from 3 different people, and all of them were technically correct. Your ERP vendor will tell you it's included. Your public works director will tell you it's a completely different system. The consultant will say it depends, and you're left wondering whether you need to budget for one system or two, whether your upcoming ERP project will solve your asset management problems or ignore them entirely, and whether anyone actually knows what they're talking about. Here's the answer, and it's more nuanced than the vendors want you to believe. EAM can be part of ERP, but in most government organizations, it probably shouldn't be. Let me explain why that distinction matters and how to think about it for your situation. Now, before we can answer whether EAM belongs inside your ERP, we need to be clear about what enterprise asset management actually covers, because the term gets thrown around loosely. At its core, EAM is the discipline of managing physical assets throughout their entire life cycle, from the day you acquire them, through decades of operation and maintenance, to eventual replacement or disposal. The software that supports this discipline needs to handle several critical functions, and we're not even talking about depreciation and the financial treatment of these assets. But first, there's work order management, the ability to create, assign, track, and close maintenance tasks. When a street light goes out, or a pump fails, or a vehicle needs service, somebody creates a work order. A crew gets dispatched, parts are used, labor is tracked, and eventually the work gets completed and documented. Second, there's preventative maintenance scheduling. Rather than waiting for things to break, mature organizations schedule regular maintenance activities, oil changes, filter replacements, inspections, calibrations, to prevent failures before they actually happen. The system needs to generate those work orders automatically based on time intervals, meter readings, or condition triggers. Third, there's asset inventory and life cycle tracking. You need to know what you own, where it's located, what condition it's in, how old it is, how much you've spent maintaining it, and when it's likely to need replacement. For a government organization, this might include vehicles, buildings, roads, water mains, sewer lines, traffic signals, park equipment, and thousands of other assets spread across the community. Fourth, there's a resource management portion to this. Scheduling crews, tracking parts, inventory, managing equipment, and allocating labor across competing priorities. And fifth, increasingly, there's integration with GIS, Geographic Information Systems, because many government assets are fundamentally spatial. A water main isn't just an asset. It's a specific pipe running under a specific street connected to specific valves and hydrants, and you can't effectively manage infrastructure assets without understanding where they are, how they're connected to each other. So when you add all of this up, EAM is a substantial functional area with deep operational requirements. It's not a minor module you tack onto something else. It's the operational backbone of public works, utilities, fleet management, and facilities maintenance. So what's ERP then? Let's contrast it with EAM. ERP systems emerged from manufacturing and evolved into comprehensive platforms for managing any organization's core administrative functions. In government, that typically means financial management and accounting, budget development and monitoring, procurement and purchasing, human resource management and payroll, and increasingly things like project accounting and grants management. The defining characteristic of ERP is integration around financial transactions. It's the brain hive. When someone submits a purchase requisition, the ERP checks the budget, routes for approval, generates a purchase order, receives the goods, matches the invoice, and posts the payment, all within a connected workflow that maintains financial controls and creates an audit trail. Of course, this is in a well set up, well implemented ERP system. But ERP systems are fundamentally oriented around dollars and cents, around organizational structure and approval hierarchies, around compliance and control. They're designed by people who think about debits and credits, about fund accounting and appropriations, about position controls and benefit administration. And this is very different from the operational world of asset management, which is oriented around physical things, around maintenance tasks and repair histories, around equipment reliability and remaining useful life. So the philosophical orientation matters because it shapes how software gets designed. When ERP is built for the financial office, EAM is built for the maintenance shop. So where do these two worlds connect and where do they diverge? The connection points are real and important. When a maintenance crew completes a work order, the labor costs need to flow into the financial system. When parts are used, inventory needs to be updated and costs need to be allocated. When capital equipment is purchased, it needs to appear in both the asset management system and the fixed asset ledger. When maintenance spending accumulates on an asset, that information needs to feed into capital planning and replacement decisions. These integration points create a very legitimate argument for having everything in one system. If work orders, purchasing, payroll, and accounting all lived in the same database, so the thinking goes, then information flows automatically without the complexity of building and maintaining integrations between separate systems. And indeed, every major ERP vendor offers some kind of asset management functionality. They'll call it an asset management module or a work order module or a maintenance management module, and it will appear on future comparison checklists, and the vendor will demonstrate it during the sales process. And if you want to learn more about the different terms involved in enterprise asset management, click on this video. Here's where the gap emerges. ERP vendors build asset management modules to satisfy a checkbox requirement, not to serve as the primary system for a complex maintenance operation. The functionality is typically adequate for tracking fixed assets for accounting purposes, depreciation schedules, capital reporting, that sort of thing. But it falls short of what public works and utilities actually need for day-to-day operation. The work order functionality in most ERP systems is modeled after IT help desk tickets, simple requests with linear workflows. But maintenance work orders in the real world are pretty complex. They span multiple days. They involve multiple crews with different skills. They consume parts from inventory and the warehouse and require equipment like trucks and backhoes. They affect multiple assets simultaneously. They need to be scheduled based on how close they are to each other and to the crew. You also need to look at crew availability and the skill sets they have. So the GIS integration in most ERP systems is minimal to non-existent. Now, you might be able to store coordinates, but you won't get the spatial queries, the map-based work order creation, or the network tracing that utilities require. Also, the mobile capabilities in most ERP systems, they're designed for office workers checking email, doing a quick approval, not necessarily field crews completing work orders with dirty hands and unreliable cell coverage. The preventative maintenance functionality in most ERP systems is also calendar-based only. So you're not going to get the meter-based triggers, condition-based alerts, or optimization algorithms that a mature maintenance program requires. So this gap isn't a bug, it's a reflection of priorities. While ERP vendors invest their development resources in financial functionality because that's what drives purchasing decisions for most of their customers, asset management is an afterthought in most ERP systems, and it shows. So let me tell you about a city that discovered this gap the hard way. They were implementing a new ERP system, a major project, multi-year timeline, substantial budget, and the ERP vendor had an asset management module, and the project team assumed it would meet public works' needs. After all, the ERP had included asset management requirements, and the vendor had checked all of the boxes. Public works wasn't heavily involved in the selection process. They were told they'd be getting a new system as part of the larger ERP implementation, and that sounded fine actually. Their current maintenance system was paper and pencil or Excel sheets or outdated, and they were eager for something new. So the ERP implementation proceeded in phases, with financials and HR going first. Asset management was scheduled for phase 3, about 18 months into the project. So when phase 3 arrives and Public Works finally got a look at what they'd be using, the problem surfaced immediately. The work order functionality couldn't handle their complexity. Their crews regularly worked on jobs that spanned multiple days, involved multiple pieces of equipment, and affected multiple assets. A water main repair might require updating the main itself, several valves, and a hydrant, all in the same work order. The ERP module wanted one asset per work order with a simple open to close workflow, which isn't reality for this client. The GIS integration was essentially non-existent. Public Works had invested years building a comprehensive GIS database of their infrastructure. So the ERP could store asset coordinates as data fields, but there was no map interface. No ability to click on the map and see asset history, no spatial queries to find all assets within a certain distance or location. And for a water utility, it was crippling. You can imagine a pipe network without understanding how pipes connect to each other. You can't manage it. The mobile application was a responsive version of the desktop interface. Slow and clunky on a phone, not natively built for a phone that is designed for work order management. It was designed for occasional reference rather than constant field use. So their crews needed to receive work orders, update status, record labor and material, and capture photos, all while standing in a ditch or sitting in a truck. The ERP module experience made this painful. Public Works pushed back hard. This doesn't work for us. We can't do our jobs with this system, is what they said. So the project teams caught off guard. They'd assumed the module would be adequate. Now they faced a difficult choice. Force Public Works to use an inadequate system or spend significant amount of money on customizing the ERP module beyond recognition, or procure a separate enterprise asset management system and build the integration they'd been trying to avoid. So they ended up choosing the third option, by the way. And after spending 18 months assuming the ERP would handle asset management, they ended up buying a dedicated EAM system anyway, adding scope, budget, timeline to a project that was already complex enough. So the lesson isn't that their ERP was bad. It was actually a solid system for financials. The lesson is that they assumed asset management was part of ERP without really digging in or investigating whether the ERP's asset management capabilities actually met the Public Works Department's requirements, their operational requirements, two different worlds. So let me give you a better way to think about this. Rather than asking, is EAM part of ERP, which is really a question about software architecture, ask, what do my operations actually need? And which systems can deliver that? Some organizations have relatively simple asset management needs. A small city with a modest fleet, basic facilities, no utilities might find that an ERP's asset management module is perfectly adequate. They don't need sophisticated GIS integration because they don't manage linear infrastructure. They don't need complex work order workflows because their maintenance tasks are straightforward. They may not need advanced preventative maintenance because their asset base is small enough to manage manually or on a spreadsheet. So for these organizations, keeping everything in the ERP makes sense. The integration benefits are real though, and operational requirements aren't demanding enough to justify a separate system. But many government organizations, particularly those with utilities, significant infrastructure, or large fleets, have operational requirements that exceed what the ERP modules typically provide. They need real GIS integration, not just coordinate storage. They need complex work order workflows that match how their crews actually operate. They need mobile tools designed for field conditions. They need preventive maintenance capabilities that go beyond simple calendar scheduling. So, for these organizations, a dedicated enterprise asset management system is usually necessary, even though it creates integration requirements with the ERP. The deciding factor isn't software category definitions or vendor marketing claims. It's operational reality. Talk to your public works director, your fleet manager, your utilities director. Show them what the ERP module actually does operationally, not just financially. Not the demo highlight reel, but the actual functionality mapped against their daily workflows. And if you want to learn more about how to pick out vaporware or things that don't exist in an ERP product or an EAM product, click on this video. So if they say it works for them, believe them. If they say it doesn't work for them, believe them. And involve them in the evaluation process from the beginning, not as an afterthought in phase 3. If asset management is important to your organization, it deserves the same attention as financials during system selection. So when you're evaluating an ERP system that claims to include asset management, here are the questions that will reveal whether the claim is substantive or just marketing. Ask to see complex work orders, multi-day, multi-crew, multi-asset, not simple request tickets, but real maintenance work orders that match your operational reality. Ask to see the GIS integration, not coordinates in a database, but actual map-based interaction. Can a supervisor click on a map and see all assets at a location? Can a crew receive a work order with a map showing exactly where to go? Ask to see the mobile application in offline mode. What happens when cell coverage drops? Can crews continue working and sync later? You should also ask to see preventive maintenance scheduling based on meter readings or condition data, not just calendar dates. And ask for references. Specifically, organizations with similar operational complexity to yours that use the ERP module for their primary asset management system. Not organizations that just have the module, but organizations that actually rely on it for daily maintenance operations. And if the vendor can't produce those references, that tells you something important about who actually uses this functionality for serious asset management work. If you want to learn more about doing a great reference check, click on this video. So, is EAM part of ERP? The honest answer is it can be, but whether it should be depends entirely on what your operations actually require. For simple asset tracking and basic maintenance, the ERP module might be fine. For complex utilities, infrastructure, fleet operations, you likely need something purpose-built. The question of integrated versus best-of-breed systems comes up constantly in government technologies. So if you want the full framework for thinking about these decisions, not just for asset management, but across all specialized functions, watch this video. Thank you.